In the ever-expanding universe of global music, few encounters have felt as magical and as mysterious as the one between Coldplay's poetic frontman Chris Martin and South Korea's unstoppable sensation, BTS. It wasn't just a collaboration. It was a cosmic alignment. When Coldplay and BTS came together for My Universe in 2021, the world didn't just get a song. It got a meeting of minds. A bridge between British introspection and Korean ambition. Between a band that defined millennial emotion and another that redefined Gen Z's global identity. But somewhere along that journey, something unexpected happened. Chris Martin, known for his calm wisdom, spiritual curiosity, and deep respect for creativity, began to talk about BTS, not as idols, not as global stars, but as thinkers. And in his quiet, reflective way, he revealed something fascinating. There are members in BTS whose intelligence, empathy, and artistic understanding completely blew him away. Fans went wild. Comment sections erupted. Everyone wanted to know, who did Chris Martin think was the smartest? Who, among the 7 prodigies of BTS, stood out not just for talent, but for intellect? But here's the thing. When Chris Martin speaks, he doesn't hand out compliments easily. This is the man who's worked with the likes of Beyoncé, Rihanna, and Jay-Z, who's written lyrics that sound like prayers disguised as pop songs, who studied ancient philosophy while composing stadium anthems. When he calls someone brilliant, he means it. So imagine the weight behind his words when he said, "They're all incredibly intelligent in their own way." That's when fans started to dig deeper, analyzing interviews, watching behind-the-scenes footage, reading between every line and every smile from Chris. From there, a ranking began to form. Not one based on IQ or test scores, but on emotional intelligence, creative depth, and the kind of wisdom that can't be taught. Because with BTS, smart doesn't always mean book smart. Sometimes it's philosophical, sometimes emotional, sometimes even spiritual. From the member who dives deep into literature and art, to the one who channels emotions into lyrics that make millions cry, to the quiet thinker who says little but reads the room like a sage, every one of them represents a different shade of genius. And Chris Martin, a man who has spent decades turning thoughts into melodies, saw that clearly. This is not just a list. It's a journey through the hidden minds of 7 icons told through the lens of another legend who knows brilliance when he sees it. So tonight, we're not just ranking BTS members. We're diving into their intellectual DNA. Who amazed Chris with their wisdom? Who challenged his ideas about music and humanity? Who did he call deeply insightful? And who reminded him of his younger self? From Seoul's neon-lit studios to London's quiet recording rooms, from moments of laughter to confessions of doubt, we'll uncover the 7 distinct ways BTS redefines what it means to be smart. Because in this ranking, last place doesn't mean least intelligent. It means still a genius, just in a different way. So, grab your curiosity and hold your breath. We're about to step into the world where music meets mind, where art meets intellect, and where one British legend meets 7 Korean visionaries. This is Chris Martin Ranks the smartest BTS members. And trust us, you won't believe who's number 1. Number 7. Jules Hope, the Sunshine Strategist. If intelligence had a rhythm, J-Hope's would be a beat steady, vibrant, and endlessly optimistic. At first glance, you might see him as BTS's ball of energy, the eternal sunshine, the laughter in every practice room, the dancer who turns every move into magic. But here's the twist that even Chris Martin noticed. Behind that radiant smile hides a mind that plans, calculates, and creates with precision that could rival an architect. J-Hope, or Jung Ho-seok, is not just a performer, he's a strategist. And in the world of art, strategy is a form of genius. When Chris Martin first met him, he reportedly said he was brilliantly balanced, a phrase few could understand at first. But think about it. J-Hope is the emotional equilibrium of BTS. He knows exactly when to lift the mood, when to stay grounded, and when to step back and let others shine. That kind of emotional awareness isn't learned, it's intuition sharpened by empathy. And that's a rare kind of intelligence. But let's rewind for a second. Long before BTS conquered the globe, Hoseok was just a teenager from Gwangju with a passion for dance. He trained for years, honing his body and mind to move as one. In street dance, There are no shortcuts, only discipline. Every step, every freestyle, every spin is a decision, a calculation. And through that journey, he developed what psychologists call kinesthetic intelligence, the ability to think through movement. That's why even Chris Martin, who has spent his life performing on some of the world's biggest stages, was fascinated by J-Hope's ability to blend physical energy with intellectual clarity. When Coldplay and BTS collaborated on My Universe, J-Hope wasn't just dancing, he was communicating. He studied the flow of the song, observed the emotional tone of the lyrics, and designed his movements not to stand out, but to harmonize. That's what impressed Chris. He understands energy, Martin once said in an interview, not just in music, but in people. Because J-Hope doesn't just perform, he reads the room. He knows when his members are tired, when the fans need comfort, when an interview needs laughter. He has the uncanny ability to turn tension into ease. That's not coincidence. That's emotional intelligence in motion. And let's talk about his solo work, Hope World. Bursting with color, optimism, and poetic self-awareness, that album isn't just a musical project. It's a manifesto of positivity. And it's not blind positivity either. It's a philosophy. In the track Blue Side, you can hear him wrestling with loneliness, purpose, and identity. Yet he transforms those thoughts into rhythm, into something you can dance to. That's pure genius. The ability to turn pain into pulse, fear into flow. Chris Martin, a man who has written songs like Fix You and Viva La Vida, understands that kind of transmutation when emotion becomes creation. That's why J-Hope ranks here, because his intelligence doesn't shout, it glows. It's the light that guides the group through chaos. Think of BTS as a galaxy with each member representing a planet with its own gravity. J-Hope is the orbit that keeps them balanced. When things spin out of control, he's the one who pulls them back with laughter, a reassuring word, or a perfectly timed joke. That's not luck. That's awareness, the mark of someone who understands that intelligence is not just what you know, but what you feel. In Chris Martin's world, where empathy and art intertwine, J-Hope stands out as the sunshine strategist, a man who solves emotional equations with a smile. He may not be the philosopher of the group, nor the quiet poet, but his brilliance lies in how he connects everything. He's the bridge between heart and mind, chaos and calm, laughter and leadership. And maybe that's the secret Chris Martin saw in him, a reminder that sometimes the smartest person in the room isn't the one talking about ideas, but the one making everyone else believe in them. Number 6. Jin, the witty philosopher. If humor is the armor of the wise, then Kim Sok-in wears it like a crown. To most fans, Jin is the worldwide handsome face of BTS, the one who cracks jokes, the one who lightens every interview with playful banter and meme-worthy moments. But when Chris Martin met him, he saw something very different shimmering behind those jokes, an intellect that hides behind laughter, a kind of quiet wisdom wrapped in dad jokes and self-deprecating charm. Because Jin, for all his playfulness, is what philosophers call the thinker who smiles. Long before fame, Jin was a film major student at Konkuk University. That's not just a random degree. That's where he trained to understand story, symbolism, and human psychology. He studied how light hits an actor's face, how a line of dialogue can change a scene's emotional temperature, how silence can say more than words. That background gave him one of the sharpest narrative minds in BTS, a storyteller who sees life like a movie, always aware of camera angles, rhythm, and tone. And Chris Martin, who builds entire albums around emotional arcs, instantly recognized that instinct. During their collaboration, he mentioned that Jin had a way of asking questions that made me think about music differently. Imagine that a Korean idol making one of the most poetic British songwriters pause and reflect. But here's what makes Jin's intelligence unique. It's disguised as simplicity. He doesn't overcomplicate things. When the group faces exhaustion or tension, he'll throw in a joke so perfectly timed that everyone laughs not because it's just funny, but because it releases pressure. That's social genius. It's an art to sense the emotional temperature of a room and reset it in seconds. Chris has that same skill, so when he saw Jin do it, he knew it wasn't coincidence, it was craft. There's a reason psychologists talk about the wisdom of humor. Humor isn't mindless. It's pattern recognition, seeing connections others miss. When Jin flips a stressful situation into a punchline, he's actually reframing it cognitively, helping the group move from anxiety to creativity. That's the kind of intelligence leaders and comedians share. And remember, Jin isn't just the joker. He's also the member who, when things get heavy, says quietly profound things, like, happiness is not something you have to achieve. You can still feel happy during the process. That line alone could sit comfortably in a self-help book, simple words with layered meaning. When Chris Martin first heard Jin's solo track Epiphany, he said it was beautifully honest. And that honesty is the essence of Jin's intellect. Epiphany isn't a love song for someone else. It's a love song for oneself, a reminder to practice self-acceptance in a world obsessed with perfection. That's philosophical intelligence. In a culture that prizes success and image, Jin stands there saying, "You're enough." That's not just comforting, that's radical wisdom. And let's talk about his demeanor. Jin has what philosophers call serene confidence. He doesn't compete to prove he's smart or talented. He simply is. When Chris Martin spent time with BTS, he noticed that Jin often stayed quiet in discussions, listening first, then dropping one sentence that made everyone laugh or think. That's the hallmark of the reflective mind, to process deeply, then speak precisely. Even his approach to fame shows this clever awareness. Jin once said he intentionally acts silly so fans can feel comfortable, because if the idol seems too perfect, people can't relate. That's not immaturity. That's emotional strategy. He understands human psychology well enough to build connection through imperfection. And that's exactly the kind of artistry Chris Martin lives, for the kind that unites people by revealing vulnerability. So why does Jin sit here at number 6? Because his brilliance isn't in grand theories or lyrical complexity. It's in timing, empathy, and narrative intuition. He's the mind that keeps BTS human, the philosopher who reminds the world that intelligence isn't just in books, it's in laughter, kindness, and self-awareness. Chris Martin saw that sparkle in him, the one that says, even if the world takes itself too seriously, I choose joy. Jin is the philosopher who hides his depth behind a smile, the man who turns chaos into comedy and loneliness into love song. The thinker disguised as the funny one, and maybe, just maybe, that's the most intelligent disguise of all. Number 5 volts, the emotional visionary. If there's one member who seems to live halfway between dream and reality, it's V-born Kim Tae-young. He's the one with that soulful, faraway gaze, the one who seems to be watching the world through a cinematic lens that only he can see. To the casual fan, V is the mysterious one, the artist with a jazzy voice and eccentric charm. But to Chris Martin, the man who spent his life chasing meaning through melody, V is something else entirely, an emotional visionary, a thinker who doesn't talk through logic but through feeling. When they first met, Chris reportedly said he was enchanted by his aura. That might sound poetic, but it's not exaggeration. Because Tae-young doesn't just enter a room, he shifts its frequency. He carries an awareness that isn't loud, but heavy with presence. Chris, who studied philosophy and metaphysics in his own way through music, recognized this instantly. V's intelligence isn't about facts. It's about perception. He sees things in textures, moods, and silences. Let's go back to where it all began. Before the world tours, before the luxury suits and the flashing cameras, V was a small-town boy from Daegu who loved the sound of saxophones and the colors of autumn. He was supposed to be just another trainee. But there was something about the way he looked at things, how he lingered in moments others would rush past. That ability to observe, instead of just exist, became his greatest strength. He once said, "I like to watch people, how they move, how they talk. That's how I understand them." That single line reveals a mind tuned to empathy through observation. Chris Martin, who writes lyrics like, "Look at the stars, look how they shine for you," saw in V a similar wavelength, an artist who connects the universe to emotion. During their My Universe collaboration, Chris noticed that V didn't just follow instructions. He felt the music. He would close his eyes, hum quietly, and adjust his tone not to sound better, but to mean more. That's the mark of an emotional intellect, one that prioritizes authenticity over perfection. And it's not just in music. Look at his art, his photography, his fashion sense. Everything Tae-young touches has that signature blend of melancholy and beauty. He curates his own world the way a painter curates light deliberately, with taste and soul. He once said his biggest inspiration was Van Gogh, and that makes perfect sense. Like Van Gogh, V's mind doesn't operate in straight lines. It dances in spirals, in colors, in moods that most people don't even notice. What impressed Chris Martin most wasn't just V's artistic depth, but his stillness. In a group full of loud laughter, bright energy, and rapid discussions, V often sits back, watching, processing. That's not disinterest, that's analysis. He reads energy like a script, waiting for the exact right moment to speak or smile. And when he does, it's usually something profound or hilarious, never in between. That's high-level emotional calibration, the ability to modulate presence based on instinct. His solo work, like Singularity and Love Me Again, reveals even more layers. Those songs aren't just performances, they're psychological self-portraits. Listen closely, and you'll hear the voice of a man who questions himself, who feels deeply but refuses to dramatize it. Chris Martin once said that V had a jazz singer's heart, meaning he improvises life. He doesn't just exist in the structure of melody or choreography. He bends them, breathes into them, makes them human again. But let's not forget, behind that elegance and deep tone is a playful mind. V loves wordplay, pranks, and little absurdities. He's the kind of person who asks you a question that sounds random, and 5 minutes later, you realize it was profound. That's intuitive intelligence at work. He doesn't study meaning. He feels it first, then translates it into expression. That's what Chris Martin saw. A person who turns existence into art. Even the way V connects with fans shows that intelligence. He doesn't give rehearsed answers. He gives moments. He'll stare into a camera during a live stream and say softly, "Are you okay?" And somehow, millions of people across the world feel it. That's emotional transmission, the ability to create empathy without words. And that's something no textbook can teach. So why number 5? Because V's intelligence is abstract, the kind that doesn't always show up in logic puzzles or debates, but in the way he moves people without even trying. He embodies what Chris Martin calls soul literacy, the understanding that every emotion, every silence has a purpose. V is the artist who doesn't explain himself, because the explanation is already in his art. In a world obsessed with being understood, V dares to remain mysterious, and maybe that's the smartest move of all. Number 4, Jimin, the empathic perfectionist. If hearts had IQs, Jimin's would break every scale. He's the heartbeat of BTS, delicate but determined, soft-spoken yet endlessly powerful. Park Jimin, the boy from Busan who trained his body into poetry and his emotions into performance, might not talk about intellect the way others do, but make no mistake, his intelligence runs deep, deep enough to feel what others can't even name. Chris Martin saw it instantly. When they met, Chris called him deeply thoughtful, not polite, not kind, thoughtful. Because Jimin's mind is built around empathy, and empathy is one of the most complex forms of human intelligence. To understand not just what someone says, but what they mean beneath the silence, that's what Jimin does. It's in his eyes, his timing, his way of listening before he speaks. When he sings, you don't just hear the note, you hear the ache behind it. Let's rewind. Jimin wasn't supposed to be in BTS at all. He joined last, almost cut during training. He came from a background of modern dance, a discipline that requires mental as much as physical control. Every movement has purpose. Every motion carries emotion. That's how Jimin learned to communicate without words. His intelligence was molded by rhythm and expression. In dance, he found a new kind of logic, the logic of feeling. During the My Universe collaboration, Chris Martin reportedly watched Jimin rehearse multiple takes, adjusting every detail, his pitch, his phrasing, even his breathing. Chris, a known perfectionist himself, was mesmerized. He said Jimin had the discipline of a craftsman and the heart of a poet. That combination is rare, because perfectionism, when driven by empathy, becomes something sacred. Jimin doesn't chase flawlessness to impress. He does it to honor connection, to make sure his art truly reaches people. And that's what sets him apart. When Jimin sings Promise or Like Crazy, it's not about technical brilliance, it's about emotional truth. His lyrics read like diary pages written at 3 a.m., trembling but honest. He once said, "I want to make music that can heal people." That's not just sentiment, that's purpose. Chris Martin understood that immediately. He spent his own life trying to do the same thing through songs like Fix You. But here's the fascinating thing about Jimin's intelligence. It's not loud, it's surgical. He notices details that others overlook, the way a member's tone shifts when they're tired, the mood of a fan crowd before a performance, the tiny cues that tell him when someone needs comfort. That's not intuition alone. That's trained empathy, shaped by awareness. There's also the mental strength beneath his softness. Jimin's perfectionism comes with self-doubt, but he doesn't run from it. He studies it. In interviews, he's open about his insecurities, how he overthinks, how he questions himself after every performance. But that introspection is exactly what fuels his growth. In psychology, it's called metacognition, the ability to think about your own thinking. And Jimin has it in abundance. He reflects, adjusts, evolves. Every comeback, every stage. He's not the same as before. He's sharper, more intentional. When Chris Martin spoke about BTS, he said what struck him was their openness to learn. Jimin personifies that. He's the student who never stops studying the human heart. He reads philosophy, writes poetry, and constantly seeks meaning in movement. His collaboration with Chris wasn't just an artistic exchange. It was a meeting of sensibilities, two perfectionists driven by love for humanity. There's a moment fans remember during the recording of My Universe. Chris hugged Jimin tightly and whispered something. Nobody knows exactly what he said, but Jimin's eyes filled with tears. Later, he said Chris told him he was beautiful inside and out. That moment encapsulates Jimin's genius to move even the most composed souls simply by being himself. Why number 4? Because Jimin represents the intelligence of feeling. He's not the loudest thinker or the most technical producer, but he's the empath who holds the group together emotionally, spiritually, artistically. In Chris Martin's world, where music is a form of prayer, Jimin shines as the disciple of emotion, the one who understands that art without empathy is just noise. Every time he steps on stage, he's not performing, he's healing. And maybe that's the highest form of intelligence there is. Number 3. Jungkook, the intuitive prodigy. When people call him the golden maknae, they usually mean talent, the voice, the dance, the visuals, the everything. But for Chris Martin, Jungkook wasn't just a prodigy, he was a phenomenon. A living example of what happens when intuition becomes intelligence. Because while others learn through books, lectures, or lessons, Jungkook learns by doing. And that, Chris understood deeply. He's the same kind of learner. When Chris met Jungkook, he reportedly said, "He just gets it." No explanation, no theory. Jungkook simply understood. Whether it was the rhythm of My Universe or the emotional weight of the lyrics, he tuned into it instantly, as if he'd been born knowing. That's the essence of Jungkook's mind instinct sharpened by obsession. He doesn't stop until it feels right, and when it does, he knows without needing anyone to tell him. That kind of intelligence can't be taught. It's encoded. Let's rewind to the beginning. Jungkook joined BTS when he was just 15, a kid surrounded by older members, all with their own ambitions and insecurities. But instead of being overshadowed, he absorbed. Every rehearsal, every studio session, every tiny correction he turned into data, building his mind like a human hard drive of experience. Within a few years, he could produce, direct, film, and compose. Not because someone instructed him, but because he watched. That's pattern-based intelligence, the kind used by inventors and artists who learn by observation and replication. Chris Martin, who taught himself to play multiple instruments and compose by ear, recognized that mirror instantly. He once said Jungkook reminded him of himself. In the early Coldplay days, curious, restless, unstoppable. And that's the perfect description. Jungkook's mind never rests. Even when the cameras are off, he's tinkering with sound design, with camera work, with his voice tone. He studies his own performances, like a scientist reviews experiments. But unlike a perfectionist driven by fear, Jungkook is fueled by curiosity. That curiosity has made him one of the most versatile young artists in the world. He doesn't think in boundaries. When he sings in English, he nails pronunciation effortlessly. When he directs a video, He frames shots like a trained cinematographer. When he works out, he learns form and function like a professional athlete. His brain doesn't just imitate, it internalizes. It's as if he learns through empathy, not instruction, feeling his way into mastery. Chris Martin, who's worked with musical geniuses across the globe, was captivated by Jungkook's process. During recording sessions, Jungkook often asks questions like, "How do you want this to feel?" Not, "What note should I sing?" That one-word feel defines his entire creative intelligence. He connects technical skill with emotion so seamlessly that the result never feels forced. It's pure instinct guided by empathy. But here's what makes Jungkook even more remarkable: his humility. True prodigies often struggle with ego, but Jungkook constantly calls himself a learner. That's the mark of a genius who knows growth never ends. He once said, "I'm not perfect, but I want to be better every day." And that constant pursuit of self-improvement, that hunger, is exactly what Chris Martin resonated with. Because Coldplay's journey has always been about evolution, not comfort. Even Jungkook's solo projects, like Still With You and Euphoria, reveal layers of his thought process. Listen closely, and you'll hear how he designs emotional transitions through melody, not just pretty notes, but calculated crescendos that mimic emotional release. That's emotional architecture, the kind of intelligence used by composers who understand human psychology through sound. And then there's his emotional intuition with people. In interviews, Jungkook reads energy. He listens with his eyes, his posture, his silence. He knows when to crack a smile, when to reassure, when to push harder. His social calibration is instinctive, not practiced. That's the brilliance of his mind. It operates through flow, not formula. So why number 3? Because Jungkook represents the intuitive genius, the kind of brilliance that doesn't show up on paper but dominates in practice. Chris Martin saw it in the way Jungkook understood harmony and tone without explanation. He once said, "He feels music in his bones." And that's no exaggeration. Jungkook doesn't need the map. He's already inside the terrain. In the grand constellation of BTS, he's the one who glows through instinct, the artist who learns the laws of the universe by living them. And for Chris Martin, that kind of mind-wild, curious, humble, unstoppable isn't just smart. It's genius in motion. Number 2, SUGA, the Analytical Architect. If BTS were a symphony, Min Yoongi, better known as SUGA, would be the conductor behind the curtain, the architect designing the invisible structure that keeps the music alive. Fans see him as the quiet producer, the rapper who drops words like bullets. But to Chris Martin, he was something more, the mind that thinks in blueprints. A thinker, a philosopher, and a problem solver, all rolled into one. Chris once described him as incredibly grounded. That's not just a compliment, it's an acknowledgement. Because SUGA's genius isn't loud or flamboyant. It's mechanical, psychological, and philosophical at once. When he walks into a studio, he's already hearing things no one else can. Harmonies that don't exist yet. Lyrical flows that haven't been written. Emotions that haven't found a shape. He processes life the way an engineer reads equations. Every feeling becomes a formula, and he solves it with beats. Let's rewind to Daegu. A teenage Yoongi sat in a small bedroom filled with secondhand equipment, producing songs for underground rappers and dreaming of survival. He wasn't chasing fame, he was chasing understanding. He once said, "I just wanted to know why music made people feel less lonely." That question has powered his entire career. It's the same question that drives Chris Martin. Why does sound heal? Why does rhythm make us believe we belong? From the moment they met, they spoke the same language, not English or Korean, but the dialect of purpose. During their collaboration on My Universe, SUGA stayed behind after recording, analyzing the structure of the song. He wasn't satisfied until he understood how every note fit together. Chris, watching him work, later said that SUGA had a producer's mind with a poet's heart. That's exactly it. Yoongi doesn't just write verses. He designs emotional architecture. Every lyric is a beam, every drum kick a pillar, every silence a deliberate space for meaning to breathe. Listen to his solo work, August D, D2, D-Day. You can trace the evolution of a mind dissecting itself. He raps about depression, fame, and philosophy with surgical precision. When he says, People say they envy me, but I envy them too. He's performing existential calculus, converting vulnerability into universal logic. Chris Martin, who spent years writing songs about self-doubt and cosmic wonder, immediately understood that wavelength. Both men are thinkers of contradiction. They build light out of darkness. What makes SUGA's intelligence so rare is his ability to systemize emotion. Most artists drown in their feelings. Jungi organizes his. He treats sadness like data studies it, codes it, transforms it into sound. That's analytical empathy, the power to empathize without losing control. In the chaotic storm of fame, that clarity makes him the quiet stabilizer of BTS. When the group debates creative directions, SUGA's the one who listens, weighs, and decides with logic that feels like meditation. Chris noticed that too. He said that talking with SUGA was like having coffee with an old philosopher. They discussed not just music, but life identity, healing, impermanence. In one interview, Chris even mentioned he felt spiritually recharged after speaking to him. That's the Jungi effect. He grounds people, not by preaching, but by calmly exposing truth. And then there's his technical mind. Most producers learn through trial and error. SUGA reverse engineers sound. He can take apart a song like a watch, see how the gears move, and rebuild it better. That's not luck, that's architectural intelligence. He understands structure intuitively, the way some people understand faces or emotions. Chris, a producer himself, was amazed by the precision. It's why their creative respect feels mutual, one analytical architect meeting another. But what truly makes SUGA extraordinary is his humility toward knowledge. For someone who could easily call himself a genius, he constantly says he's still learning. That humility keeps his brain open. It's the paradox of the wise. The more he knows, the more he admits how little he truly understands. That's the same philosophical humility that defines great thinkers, from Lao Tzu to Einstein to, yes, Chris Martin. So why number 2? Because SUGA represents the architect mind, the builder, the analyst, the philosopher-engineer. He dissects chaos and builds clarity. He speaks the truth others avoid. He transforms pain into blueprints, loneliness into rhythm. Chris Martin saw in him a mirror, a man who doesn't chase the spotlight, but builds the stage for everyone else to shine. In the world of BTS, he's the brain behind the brilliance, the quiet current of logic that powers the storm of creativity. And Chris knew it. You can't have harmony without structure, and you can't have genius without reflection. SUGA is both. The thinker who raps, the builder who feels, the mind that turns silence into symphony. Number 1, RM, the Philosopher Leader. Every great band has a leader, but BTS has something rarer, a philosopher who leads. Kim Namjoon, known worldwide as RM, is not just the translator between languages, but between worlds, East and West, art and reason, chaos and order. To Chris Martin, RM wasn't merely smart. He was the bridge that made BTS understandable to the universe. Chris once said, "He's one of the wisest people I've ever met." Coming from a man who spent decades among poets, scientists, and dreamers, that's not casual praise, it's testimony. Because RM's intelligence isn't academic, it's existential. He's a thinker in the truest sense. A young man who carries centuries of philosophy in his eyes and decades of human experience in his voice. From the beginning, RM was the mind of BTS. He studied English by watching Friends, taught himself songwriting, and absorbed every piece of literature he could find. But what's more impressive than his learning is how he uses it. He doesn't quote knowledge, he transforms it. Read his lyrics in songs like Reflection, Persona, Trivia, Love, or Soul. They aren't just songs, they're essays about identity, alienation, and hope. Chris Martin, who's written about the soul and the stars, saw in RM a kindred mind, one who builds meaning from uncertainty. During the My Universe collaboration, Chris reportedly called RM the interpreter. Not just linguistically, but spiritually. RM was the one who made sure every word meant something for both bands, translating emotion across cultures. Chris was stunned by his sensitivity. "He understands the feeling behind words," he said. "That's no small feat. Most people translate language. RM translates intention. That's philosophical empathy, the ability to see beyond expression into essence. What truly makes RM's intelligence special is his synthesis of opposites. He's both rational and poetic, logical and intuitive, modern and ancient. He can quote Nietzsche in one breath and make a meme the next. He can rap about anxiety in front of 50,000 fans and then walk through an art museum alone, taking notes about sculpture light. That balance of intellect and vulnerability is what drew Chris Martin to him. Because that's the same balance Chris has pursued his entire career. To think deeply, but never lose heart. RM's solo work, like Indigo, is the clearest window into his mind. It's not an album, it's a museum. Every track is a different exhibit of thought about love, loss, nature, and the human condition. He collaborates with painters, poets, and jazz musicians, weaving disciplines together like a cultural scholar. Chris Martin once said that music should be a universe of connection, and RM lives that truth. He doesn't separate art from life, he sees everything as one ecosystem of understanding. But RM's genius isn't just in words, it's in leadership. Imagine managing 6 other creative minds, each with different personalities, ambitions, and fears, while carrying the weight of 1 billion fans' expectations. RM does it with calm, humility, and astonishing awareness. He listens like a therapist, motivates like a strategist, and speaks like a teacher who never stops learning. Chris Martin saw that quality immediately. "He reminds me of a young philosopher," Chris said. "Someone who's already thinking about how art can serve humanity." There's a story fans love. After recording My Universe, RM told Chris how Coldplay's music had guided him through his teenage years. Chris smiled and said, "Now you are that for others." In that moment, mentor and student became equals 2 philosophers in conversation, united by melody and meaning. That's how much respect Chris had for him. What makes RM truly remarkable is how he wears intellect with gentleness. He never uses his knowledge to dominate, but to connect. He once said, "The more I learn, the more I realize how little I know." That humility, that awareness of vastness, is what makes him wise beyond his years. It's the same humility Chris Martin lives by, the kind that turns knowledge into grace. So why number 1? Because RM is not just smart, he's enlightened. He embodies every layer of intelligence: emotional, creative, linguistic, philosophical, strategic. He leads not by control, but by compassion. He creates not for ego, but for understanding. Chris Martin saw in him the kind of mind that changes not just music, but the way people think about what music can mean. In the grand symphony of BTS, RM is the conductor of consciousness, the one who turns thought into art, confusion into clarity, sound into soul. He's the proof that leadership and intellect can be one and the same, that poetry can coexist with pragmatism, that a boy who once learned English from sitcoms could one day speak the language of the universe. Chris Martin knew it instantly. This wasn't just a musician. This was a thinker, a philosopher in sneakers.